Good morning, students. Today I'm dealing with the first part of one of the greatest novels in English literature, Wuthering Heights, written by Emile Bronte. Emile Bronte happens to be one of the greatest Victorian novelists. She wrote the novel Wuthering Heights way back in 1847 under the pseudonym Elizabeth. She did not write any other novel after that because she died immediately after writing the novel Wuthering Heights. Emile Bronte's novel Wuthering Heights deals with the unusual, stormy and passionate love story of Heathcliff and Catherine. And this novel has cast a magic spell over the readers for nearly 2 centuries. And the protagonist of the novel, Wuthering Heights, has never ceased to be irresistible to the critics over the years. Wuthering Heights is generally considered as a Gothic novel. A Gothic novel is a kind of novel that became popular in the early 18th century. The atmosphere and setting of the Gothic novel is eerie and scary. As a result, it evokes fear and anxiety in the mind of readers. The plot of a Gothic novel is invariably enshrouded in mystery. The important thing about Gothic novel is that the hero is very often depicted as someone with anti-hero traits. And in order to add to the tense atmosphere, so as I deal with the novel, I will be just going deeply into the characteristic traits of Heathcliff, and then I will be just examining the Gothic aspects of the novel, Wuthering Heights. And the important Gothic novels in English literature are Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and many of Edgar Allan Poe's writings are considered to be Gothic in nature. The most important Gothic novel that the entire world loved is Bram Stoker's Dracula. So as a result, this is taken as the most brilliant example of a Gothic fiction. So the novel Wuthering Heights begins with the sentence, 1801. I have just returned from a visit to my landlord. The solitary neighbor I shall be troubled with. So this is incidentally the diary entry of a young man called Lockwood. Lockwood, in order to escape from the hustle and bustle of life around him, has sought shelter in this far-flung, tucked away countryside in the Yorkshire moor. He just loved the place very much as he reached, and he just described the place as a misanthropist's haven. A misanthropist's haven means a place of great solitude where one can spend all the time by oneself without bothering about the interference of others. And there he meets his landlord Heathcliff. And when he reached in front of the house called Wuthering Heights, he just found him there in front of the house. And Lockwood looked at Heathcliff. And then he realized that Heathcliff's eyes were set deeply in, and it had an air of suspicion about it. And usually, when one goes to a host, the host is likely to shake hands with the guest. But Lockwood noticed that Heathcliff's hands were going deeper into the pockets of his coat as he approached him. And that tells something about the reserved character of Heathcliff, and that clearly tells the readers that Heathcliff does not want to do anything with other people. Actually, Lockwood is very much delighted by this personality of Heathcliff, because Lockwood happens to be such a person, so reserved. And as I told you earlier, it is in order to escape from the people that he sought this far-flung place. And he introduced himself to Heathcliff. I'm Lockwood, your new tenant, sir. And the words like landlords and tenants appear here simply because Lockwood rented out one of the houses of Mr. Heathcliff in Yorkshire. And he wrote before to Heathcliff seeking permission for the occupation of the house called the Cross Grange that belongs to Heathcliff. And Heathcliff just nodded. He did not say anything. So that adds to the reticent nature of Heathcliff. And then he told Lockwood, come in. But he uttered that word, come in, with the impression of telling someone, go to hell or get out. So he did not seem to be very happy in receiving Lockwood to his house. So Lockwood looked around, and he just saw the main servant of the house, Joseph, coming in. And Joseph is an old manservant of the house called Wuthering Heights, and he always had the habit of Lord save us, and he always said that under his breath. And then Heathcliff told Joseph to take care of the horse, on which Lockwood rode to Wuthering Heights. And then Lockwood had a very good look around, and he had a good view of the house Wuthering Heights from the place where he stood. And he observed that the house was built so strongly with granites, and then the house had very narrow windows, and the edges of the house were reinforced with stronger granite stones. And then some fir trees stood near the house, and those fir trees were nearly bent by the storms which appeared now and then. And then there were thorny plants in between, and these thorny plants bent in the direction of the sun. And this Wuthering house and the setting, all these are very symbolic in nature. In a way, the Wuthering house stands for the character of Heathcliff himself, because Heathcliff is a strongly built man, mentally, physically, and nobody can peep into his character. or peep into his mind. Just like the windows of the house were made so narrow. And then looking at the bend fir trees, Heathcliff's character is very much twisted. As we go ahead in the novel, we are bound to see the twisted nature of Heathcliff. And of course, when we just refer to the image of the thorny plants bending in the direction of the sunshine, we are bound to see at a later point of time the craving of love that Heathcliff had in his mind, and love was always denied to him. And the house was named Wuthering Heights. Wuthering is incidentally a provincial term that refers to the atmospheric tumult to which the place is exposed in stormy weather. So once again, Heathcliff's character is like that. As he lived through the years, he had to encounter a number of storms. So he was battered by stormy incidents throughout his life. And then while he was stepping into the house, he just noticed the year in which the house was made. It was made way back in 1500. That means it's a pretty old house now, an ancient house. And he got into the house, and then he's paying special attention to the appearance of Heathcliff now. So Heathcliff appeared to be a gypsy because his complexion is dark. But in his dress, he is very much like a gentleman. And he is very tall and strongly built. And now the novelist is telling how Lockwood happened to be in this place, in this faraway and desolate Yorkshire moon. So the novelist tells that Lockwood, the young man, once a little bit before, he went to a seashore in the western part of the country, and there Lockwood came across a young lady who was camping there for a few days with her family. And Lockwood started paying attention to that beautiful young lady, and he was in love with her at the very first sight. But Lockwood was a very reserved character. He could never bring himself to talk to a stranger easily. So he just found it hard to put across to the young lady that he is really in love with that young lady. But accepting or understanding the behavior on the part of Lockwood, the lady could form the idea that Lockwood paid attention to her, and she just gave back all the attentions that received. But Lockwood, being the man he is, so reserved and reticent, just withdrew into his shell, and the girl just mistook him completely, and then she felt that what she thought about the approach of the young man was totally wrong, and she immediately decamped. That experience really frustrated Lockwood, and he cursed his inability to communicate with other people. And of course, his mother had warned him about his nature once. She told her son, "My son, you would be never able to keep a home owing to your character." And then Lockwood, that's what Lockwood, how Lockwood happened to reach this place. And now Lockwood went into the house, and he invariably found Heathcliff not sharing a few words with him. And then he was asked to sit down, and while sitting down, he just noticed a dog near him. It's a mother dog, and then the dog was closing in on him, and he just patted the head of the dog, and then it snarled at him. And Heathcliff warned him, "You cannot play with my dogs, and these dogs are not reared to be pets, and don't interfere with them." And then Lockwood just kept quiet, pulled back his hand, and then Heathcliff went into the house, calling for Joseph, the man servant. And at that time, Lockwood looked at the dog once again, and he just made a face at the dog. That means he made some strange facial expressions, thinking that the dog will not pick it up. And but unfortunately, the dog noticed the changes on his face, and it came rushing towards him. Lockwood kicked back the dog, and at that time, the dog made a big bark, and then various dogs, nearly half a dozen dogs, came from their hiding places. And all these dogs surrounded Lockwood. Lockwood just went behind the table in order to save himself. And meanwhile, he screamed aloud to others to come and help him. But Heathcliff was not forthcoming. And at that time, fortunately, the housemaid rushed in with a frying pan in her hand, and she used the frying pan and her sharp tongue in order to pull back the dogs from the vicinity of Lockwood. And Lockwood was really shaken by this terrible incident in which he found himself involved. And after a few minutes, Heathcliff came to the scene, and Heathcliff asked, "What the hell is going on here?" And then Lockwood said that your dogs are worse than devils, and then you should have left me in a pack of tigers. That would have been better. And then Heathcliff told Lockwood that nothing would have, Heathcliff told Lockwood that my dogs would not have made trouble unless you touched something. And of course, dogs are supposed to be vigilant, aren't they? So this was the reaction from Heathcliff, and then Lockwood understand that Heathcliff is not at all sympathetic to anyone around, and he is rough and unsophisticated. And Lockwood is slowly changing his first impression about Heathcliff. And then Heathcliff said, "You appear to be so afraid up, so shaken up, Lockwood, and then just to have a glass of brandy, and then you will be able to make yourself cool and comfortable." And then while they sat at the table, Heathcliff had a little bit of conversation with Lockwood. And at this point of time, Lockwood found him very knowledgeable. And soon Lockwood got up, saying that the very next day he would pay another visit to Wuthering Heights. But Heathcliff did not seem interested at all in another visit by Lockwood. So that's the end of the first chapter. And then in the second chapter of the novel, Wuthering Heights, we see Lockwood reading books in in his room, and then he actually wanted to keep inside the house during the day because he understood that the weather is turning bad, and as he had promised to Heathcliff, he could not take a journey to Wuthering Heights to meet his landlord once again. But the housemaid came, and she was dusting the room all the while, and that made Lockwood to reconsider his visit to Wuthering Heights.